All right, so I'm from Forward. Thank you for the introduction. I've been with Forward for about 6 years. Before that, I was a reviewer while I worked in libraries. I just fell in love with it. It's the only independent book review journal focusing exclusively on indie books, which I think is fantastic. Victoria started it because she saw an absence in the trade journals of covering indie books or taking a chance on indie books, when the reality is that's where some of the most interesting work is happening. So she made it her mission to make sure indie presses got coverage. And they're getting more coverage in the other trade review journals now, but we're still focused only on indies. So here are some of the topics we're going to cover today. This is really geared at helping y'all get coverage in the trade review journals, and just sharing some of the tricks that are going to help you get selected for review, because we're looking at so many books at a time and we want to cover as much ground as possible. And the only way to do that is to make sure everyone's getting what they need to us in a timeline that we can cover you. So we'll talk about the difference between trade and consumer reviews, the timelines that you need to consider when you're submitting, what you need to submit, what you need to think about when you're doing your cover letter or sell sheet, and some ways you can use a review once it's been completed. So trade journal versus consumer. The trade review journals are doing work far in advance, and they're speaking to booksellers and librarians who are considering purchases in advance of publication, whereas consumers are speaking directly to readers. Trade review journals have an interest in promoting books for readers too, but we're thinking about people doing bulk orders, and pre-publication is the major focus there. This is in alphabetical order. This is not in any other order. These are resources that librarians and booksellers trust. Some of them are very old. You'll see Kirkus is there. It's 100 years old. We're kind of the baby at turning 25 this year. But all of these resources have been around for a long time and have made credibility a part of their cornerstone. And that makes us trustworthy within the trade as well. So what we're always doing, what all of these magazines are always doing, is thinking about our audience, booksellers and librarians, but also thinking about their audiences. What are people going to pick up in a bookstore? What are they going to pick up in a library? What do librarians need to think about when they're considering a bulk order? A lot of factors go into that, including budgets, especially for libraries. But the other side of that is libraries and bookstores are budgeting to pick up a lot of books. So when you can get a bulk order from them, that's pretty fantastic. We're thinking about titles that we know they're going to pick up. For example, we see books from Beverly Lewis, that's still indie. We see books from Sarah Eden. We know that those are going to be easy purchases for librarians and booksellers, and that they don't need our review to hear about this, but that they're still part of the conversation. So we're still going to pick that book up, be a part of the conversation about the book, while also highlighting in our issues about 118 other books that they may not hear about from other resources, that they should hear about, that they should pick up. We're always thinking about that. So both the newbies, both the people whose names they might not know, but also the people whose names that they do know. And with each review, it's about providing an objective perspective on the book from a reader who is well-read in that genre, who knows its subjects, who has an interest in it, and who can speak to it in the language that prospective readers will understand. We think about trends. So for example, in Forward, we have features every issue. In an upcoming issue, we have a historical fiction feature. We have a romance feature. Those are chances to get a book in with a lot of books in its genre in one space. We also always cover juvenile children's books, YA, because we know that those do well in libraries. We cover climate change because we think it's important. We cover poetry every other issue because we think it's important that those books receive attention. So we're thinking about trends, but also covering as much ground as we can with every issue in terms of genre, nonfiction and fiction. This is going to be true for independent other journals. So when you're considering submitting, look at the journal, look at its website, see what features it has coming up. And if you can target your book or fit in to one of the features that's coming up, be sure to highlight that because it gives you just a little bit of an extra boost. So what's in it for publishers? There are a number of things that go on when you get a review from Forward or one of the other trade journals. It's getting it in front of the librarians and booksellers in print form, but it's also getting into the databases that they go to when they're considering doing a purchase and when they're not as familiar with the book. We've heard this from librarians time and again at book shows, that before they even consider purchasing a book that they are not already familiar with or are not already thinking about because they know the author, or they know it that has some pre-existing playing power in their library, they have to go to these databases. They have to see at least 3 reviews from trusted sources, so they know there's a conversation going on about the book, so that they know that it's been vetted by someone whose opinion that they trust, and they know they can invest limited resources in it. So that's a huge benefit. Once the review is yours, it's yours. So you can also blurb from it for your covers or for promotional purposes. Our reviewers are always thinking about both telling the story of the book and giving people something to quote. It's beneficial on multiple levels. So the journals differ in terms of how we write our reviews. Some of the previously mentioned review journals have very short reviews. Ours are a little longer. We have a 300-word limit on our magazine reviews. On our fee for review side, we have a lower limit of 450 words. So that's a lot of space to discuss the book and its nuances and what makes it different and unique. And our reviewers are always thinking about that. I like to think of our reviews as an educated reader standing up in front of an audience of prospective readers and basically doing a one-act play on the book. So they start out by telling their story, their version of what its story is. That's always important. They don't use the book's own words or make a book's argument for it. They say, this is how the book came across to me. And then they discuss what distinguishes it. What's it doing that's interesting in terms of language? What's it doing that's interesting in terms of characterization? What makes it distinct from other books in its genre or in its on repeat from here on out, because it is the #1 reason that we have to discard a book that's sent in for review. We have to think about our publication schedule. We have to think about the fact that we're getting completed reviews into a magazine and before librarians and booksellers, before the book comes out, so that they can do their purchasing. That means there's a window that books have to meet that can be a little difficult, that people often don't know about. And that is the #1 thing that we discard books for. That window is 4.5 months. I say that in a general way. Our next submissions deadline, for example, is the 15th. That's going to be for January, February titles. So the 4.5 months isn't for late February titles. It's a little bigger than that. For early January titles, it's a little shorter than that. As soon as you can, as soon as the book is in as complete a form as you can get it in, you want to send. You want to get it ready, you want to get it perfect, and you want to get it out to the trade review journals so that they have a long window of time where they can consider it and get it out to readers and get you back a completed product and get it before our audiences ahead of publication. So when to send, big window, 4.5 months is a good rule. What to send? I think everyone is accepting PDFs right now, but that could be incorrect. Digital copies during COVID became something that we were reluctant to go for. Just as readers, everyone likes a hard copy, but that actually ended up working out really well for everyone. So we are accepting PDFs. We're a little bit encouraging PDFs, but if you have a book that you want to get to readers in a hard copy form, we understand that too. Most of us still accept that as well. So a book in as complete a format as you can, either in PDF form or hard copy form. You want to send it with a tip sheet that gives all the relevant information to the person doing selections right up front in a succinct manner, and something that they can look at quickly, scan, and see, is this going to fit for our next issue? Follow-up is going to vary from magazine to magazine. Publishers Weekly has a big staff, and they also have a database where you can track your book through the system. Once you submit it, you can see that someone's seen it, you can see they're considering it, you can see all those steps. We have a small staff. We don't have that option, unfortunately. We're looking at about 1,200 books every issue, and there's just no way to touch base with every person who submits and say, hey, we got it. We do. We see every book. We consider every book. We appreciate every book, but we're only able to follow up with people who we do select for coverage. So if you don't hear from us, might not necessarily be a good thing. This is a place where a PR agency can work to your advantage, although we do not require them. And I'm going to have a tip sheet later in the slideshow that came to us without a PR agency that's just from a self-published author. If you can do that, if you know all the steps, if you know all the deadlines, that's completely fine. The benefit of a PR agency is often that they have working relationships with the people on the selections committee and that they know everything sort of by heart. They know when the deadlines are, they know what the features are. They can do the little extra things that get a book in the right hands. But if you can do that on your own, that is also completely great. We don't hold it against anyone or consider it a benefit necessarily. So what we're looking for, I mentioned 1,200 books. That's a lot of books to go through on top of everything else. It's exciting, but it is also time consuming, and we have a limited amount of time to spend with each book. So first impressions matter. You hear the adage all the time that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Unfortunately, that's just not reality. Readers judge books by their covers. Selections committees judge a cover. It's a sign of how much time has gone into things, how much time has gone into marketing. It's something we have to think about. So we do consider covers, and I would always recommend, if it's a press who we don't work with on a regular basis, to send cover art so we have an idea of what that's going to look like. It doesn't have to be there, but it's helpful. We look at well-written. That means different things for different genres. For fiction, it's going to mean that we generally open a book, read the opening paragraphs, see if there's a hook, see if it's doing something different, make sure it's not a from time immemorial opening. There has to be something that snags our attention. We're looking for that. And then we read a little more farther on in the book to make sure there's some story continuity, things like that. For a nonfiction book, particularly in an area that requires expertise, we're going to be looking at things like footnotes, how the presentation comes across, all of that. So with nonfiction, that also plays in very much to tip sheets. If it's a specialized topic, even if it's just science and you're speaking to a selections committee that isn't necessarily an expert in science, you want to make sure that all of your credentials are up front. So that we know that we can trust you on the subject, so that we know that we can recommend you to our audience. We're looking for things that distinguish books from other books in their genre. So if there's something different about your book, if it's a space opera, but it's doing something that you haven't seen any other space opera do, let us know. Put it in the tip sheet so that we can have that extra little bit of interest piqued in our own minds and think about it for our audience as well. A book that nobody else is covering is something that we love. We love a first-time author. We loved a self-published author who has done everything right, who we can recommend. We love seeing all of that, and we love recommending it to librarians and booksellers and saying, hey, you need to put this on the shelf along with everything else. So tell us what's distinct about you. We included 2 copies of tip sheets in this presentation just so you can see what we're looking at and what we're looking for. These tip sheets did a lot of things right in terms of just getting us information in a way that we could find it easily, that our eye could go to it. And we know, like right off the bat, that the little box at the bottom has the release date. It's essential. That's the first thing we look at. It's the #1 thing we get rid of books for. Make it accessible. Make sure we know when your book is coming out. We also have easy contact information here. We will want to follow up with selected books. Make sure we can find that in an efficient manner. If you have a distributor, that's something we have to think about for our audience because they're going to need to find a way to purchase the book. So if you have a distributor, let us know. This has information about the author. We know a little bit about her background in writing. It has a succinct summary of what the book's about. It has the cover art. This is all really good. It gives us an idea of what we can expect from the book before we even open the book. This is the tip sheet I mentioned earlier. This is a Kickstarter project. It has a little bit of the children's art on it, which is something we have to think about with picture books. It was eye-catching, it piqued our interest, and it got into its issue ahead of other books that were submitted for the same issue, simply because it was doing something different. It was eye-catching, it was self-published, it was the whole package. It was that special thing that we're looking for. And she did a really great job of presenting all of that to us on a really eye-catching tip sheet that gave us an idea of what to expect when we open the book. So this is something to think about too. If I said 4.5 months and completely freaked you out because your book is coming out next month, it does not mean that all hope is lost, and it doesn't mean that you can't get a review. Fee for review services started for this reason. They are done by a lot of the trade review journals at this point, and they are not what people always suspected or what people feared when this started, was that it was going to be a positive review because you paid for it. None of us do that. We can't. That would completely destroy our credibility. A fee for review is going to give you an objective perspective on your book. It's going to give you a guaranteed review, which is one of the benefits. We can only cover 10% of what's submitted to us. So a fee for review guarantees the review. It guarantees you're going to get in EBSCO and the other resources that librarians look at. And it's a nice option for that reason. Ours are written by the same reviewers as work for the magazine side. So if you have that medical narrative that was going to go to that particular reviewer anyway, and you submit it through Clarion, she's going to get it again because she's the one who can speak best to it. She's going to speak a little more to it because now she has, instead of a 300 word limit, a 450 word minimum, and has to cover more ground, has to think about the things I mentioned earlier. For the magazine, they're usually pulling out, well, the characterization here is really great. For Clarion, they have to consider multi-points and let you know how your book came across to them on multiple points, which is also useful to the audience. They get an even more thorough picture of the book that we just don't have the space for in the magazine. That's what I spend most of my day doing, and we're really proud of that service. Okay, so this is a little bit of a summary. It's just general advice. It's good advice for any magazine that you're going to submit to. Invest in cover art, think about interior design, think about packaging, think about making a good first impression. It matters as much as we wish it didn't. It does. Get the help of every expert you can. Make sure that your book is in perfect format. Well, is in pretty perfect format before you get it to us. Nothing should be perfect. Perfect is sanitary. Learn about the trade review journals before you send them. This is one of those sort of quirky things. I mentioned that we have a lot of features. Other journals do as well. If you can get your book into one of those features, it's always a good thing. So if you can say, hey, Forward, hey, Publishers Weekly, I see you're doing a feature on memoirs. Here's why my memoir is really interesting. That's always a benefit. It lets us know you're paying attention. It lets us know you've done your homework. And it's a little extra, just a nice way to touch base with your selections committee. So see what they're looking for. Play to that. Make sure your tip sheets have all the information up front so that we can do early selections in an efficient manner. And make sure you've put plenty of time in before you submit. I'm going to take questions in just a moment, but this is my email address. If you think of something at 3 a.m., which is when I tend to think of things, go ahead and shoot us an email. I'll respond as fast as I can. I need to pause the share.
I can help keep an eye on the chat too. It looks like Liz had a question. Will you ever review a book prior to typesetting? That's a good question.
We have. I would be more inclined to say yes with fiction than nonfiction, especially if there are footnotes or something like that. But we have and we can. We're not opposed to that.
Well, I wanted to highlight one thing so Michelle mentioned the pay for review service that a lot of the trade review outlets are offering now, but Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, Forward was the first magazine to offer that. Is that correct?
Yes, we were.
Yeah, so this is what I'm saying. It's really cool coming out of the Midwest. And you guys were clearly like a trendsetter if other people are doing that now. I was curious too about when you say that you syndicate the reviews to wholesalers, can you talk about that a little bit? Like how you do that? What does it mean for the book? Like what does that look like on the buyer's end, et cetera?
Yeah, so they go straight into the database. Different databases have different timelines in which they flow them. I'm not as much on that side of the business. I know one of them flows every 2 weeks, one flows every month, but they pull every review we do, both Clarion and Forward, on a regular basis. And then that goes into something like a librarian going to EBSCO can look up the book and see Foreword reviewed it, school library journal reviewed it, and they can see the reviews in one system place.
And that, I mean, from how I understand it, that sometimes makes the difference between a purchase or not, right? Like if it has a review with it.
We've heard that from librarians a lot. It's not going to make a difference with an author they already know, but if they're hearing about the book for the first time, they need to know that it was vetted by someone, and they can't vet every book. So that's the easiest way for them to know what to expect.
So Craig says, I have a photography coffee table book coming out in mid-November. What kind of costs are involved in fee for review?
Send me an email and we can try to figure out if you're part of any organizations that are getting discounts. Jennifer, did Victoria discuss a discount with you?
No.
Okay, well, I like discounts, so I'm going to try. I will work with you to try to figure it out. It starts at $4.99, but there are discounts available for membership in IBPA and a lot of other organizations. So I can help you to try to figure out what's available.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe we could send out an email to the participants afterwards. If you get the green light from Victoria, go ahead and send that to me, and then I can share it with the participants.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure you guys have questions. You can just shout them out. I don't have to read them.
I guess one thing I've wondered about, Michelle, is why do the reviews have to be before publication?
Librarians and booksellers want to have it on the shelf when it hits. I don't know why I mean, it sort of makes sense that they want it that way. So their patrons can come up and say, hey, this book came out today. Can I have it? That's not the only time they'll purchase, but it is important to them. And we heard that repeatedly. And we switched to a pre-publication focus because of that. We were previously a 3-month print schedule, and some of the books were already out by the time we got it. And we just heard over and over again from librarians that it was less efficient for them to hear about it after it came out.
Interesting. No, and I really like how you presented this, because I've never really thought about the trade review journals as being, I mean, really you're a service provider to the librarians and to the booksellers. And so, you know, to the publisher, you're doing a service for us to help legitimize, I guess, a book. You're doing that pre-filtering for the book buyers.
Yeah.
That's kind of
Our
cool.
hope is always to generate excitement for librarians and booksellers for books that they may not have heard about otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're excited about them. We're always covering books that we love, so we want them to love them too.
When you're talking about the fee for the review,
Mhm.
does that mean that you're going to review everybody that pays the fee, or you don't have to pay the fee if you don't review it, or how does that work?
The fee for if you order Clarion review, you're guaranteed a review. That's one of the benefits. If you submit just for the magazine, we cover 10%. That's all that we have space for. It's not feasible to cover more than that. So the fee for a review service does guarantee a review. You also get a chance to see the review before it goes live. So if it's something that you don't want to use for promotions, like we don't only do positive reviews, we have negative reviews. So if you get back a negative review and you think, yikes, I don't want that being syndicated, you have the option to kill it. So that's another benefit. But you are guaranteed a completed review that you can quote from whether or not you send it live.
So that Clarion review goes up on Clarion's website?
It's on Forward's website, yeah.
On Forwards? And how long is it up?
Forever. I mean, as long as the internet lasts.
I mean, I was personally
A
curious.
lot of books, right? I mean, you said you see a lot of books. Do you have any trends or, you know, things that you've noticed in the, over the last few years?
There are things that are like personally interesting. In the next issue, I mentioned we have a history feature. We saw a lot of historical fiction written by women, which I love personally. We saw multiple books that were retoolings of Greek myths where the women originally didn't come off very well, like Circe, but coming with other heroines, that they're getting sort of like a rebirth, which is fascinating and invigorating and really exciting. Juvenile is getting more diverse, which we love. We love to pick up a diverse children's book. It's really important for librarians to shelve those because kids need that representation. We're also seeing a lot of memoirs about people's struggles with religiosity and how that's changing. A lot of responsive things that very much speak to people in the moment, that we think people are going to need.
Can you talk a little bit about how do you even make sense of, did you say 1,200 submissions a month?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how do you make sense of that?
It's horrifying and wonderful. It's just a lot of sitting down with books and spending time with them. And I have a great ritual with covers, fantastic. For me, just because I know I have in the back of my mind, I can go to this book. I've seen this subject before. It's just a lot of spending time with books and filtering out, this is doing something unique. This fits our publication schedule. We're trying to cover as much ground in every issue as possible. So if I have 10 great historical fiction books, but we don't have a feature for historical fiction that month, then I have to group those together and whittle them down to 3 that I think are doing something a little different. It's just a lot of winnowing.
How many readers do you have?
At a given time, probably 50 active. We have a longer list, but people have school crises or health crises, or they have to step away for a moment. We have people who are in the middle of job changes and moves right now, so I know I can't use them for an issue, but about 50 active at any given time. And we're always adding to those roles. We're always vetting new reviewers, new prospective readers as well.
You assign them out then?
Yeah.
And what is your circulation like?
I believe 30,000. I think we have a 30,000 reader right now. I don't know how that's calculated. The editorial side is so separate from that, but I think it's 30,000.
Colin wrote in the chat that one of their upcoming titles will be in your issue. Do you remember that one? My Mother's Secret?
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was really excited. You guys, so we released a culinary memoir, or a memoir with recipes last year, Sober Mesa, and I don't know if it rings a bell, but you guys gave it the starred review, which was very cool to get. I don't think you mentioned that at all. So within your reviewing system, like, you just select certain to have the starred review, or what does that mean exactly?
So every review that appears in the magazine has been vetted, and we consider a recommendation. We think that librarians should shelve this if they're looking for a book in this genre. A starred review is something that struck the reviewer in a special way too, that their review was a little more glowing than usual, that just had a little something extra for them, or when we get the review back, that strikes us as something that, hey, we're even more excited about now.
Are there any trends that you would say are kind of on their way out, that you're noticing, okay, this is not something we're interested in looking at as much?
The magical school trend lasted for a long time. We're at least seeing that change. The schools are becoming more diverse. The language, or the magic systems they're working with, are a little more interesting, maybe even a little darker, but the sanitary side of it is going away a little. That's just one that's interesting to me at the moment.
You said the sanitary side of it is going away? What does that mean?
Familiar worlds, familiar language. They're a little more surprising. I cannot remember the title right now. It was in our most recent issue. That's fantastic. Takes place, I think, the heroine is West African. It's just much more surprising than the old magic school books were.
If I do a pay for review or fee review, how long does it take to get something back? I have to turn in this book to the printer at the end of the month or early October. Is there time for me to get you a PDF, get a review, and use that review on a jacket copy?
For early October, the bad news is probably not. Ours is 4 to 6 weeks simply because we give all of our reviewers a month with every book. We think that they need that much time to fit it into their lives because they're freelance workers, and also read with care and nuance and make sure that they're not rushing. Nothing upsets me as an editor more than the thought that a reviewer is going to skim or rush a book. We don't ever want that to happen. So they have a month, bar none, and then we have to edit. So we say 4 to 6 weeks because some people still read fast and produce reviews that are careful, but they're entitled to a month. So the 4 to 6, the 6 weeks is they're going to turn it in after a month, and we still have to edit. So it's a possibility, but I would not tell you that we absolutely could get it to you in that timeline.
The picture book, it goes fast.
Oh yeah. Picture books are different. But they still have a month because we don't want them to rush a picture book either. There's a better chance. Yeah. There's not a good chance if it's a 600-page book.
Naomi asked in the chat, is your fee for review service available for books already released?
Yeah, it's available. It's basically to anyone, any book at any time.
Any other questions from anyone?
So just an odd question for you. So maybe this is obvious. Do you like reading still?
Yes.
You read with pleasure.
Victoria encouraged me about 4 years ago to stop doing reviews in the magazine, but I kind of can't help myself. If something comes in that I know I'm a good reader for, I'm going to take it. Sometimes that ends up with me doing 8 books an issue and I get a look. That's appreciated too. Yes, I love books.
If we want to know like what types of books to submit when, is that on, that's on your website, right? Like the schedule for what
It is
genres?
It's under marketing services.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a little hard to find, so if you have any trouble finding it, just email me and I'll send you a PDF.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem.
So here's a question. Are you hiring?
For reviewers?
Yes.
Always.
Not me personally.
Yeah, always. There is a vetting process. We just have to know people's background and read a sample of their work so that we know that they'll fit in well and that they can critique books in the way that we critique books. But yeah, we're always hiring.
Okay, I'm looking at your website. It's somewhere in there.
We usually do ads for that, so I would again just email me. I know that I'm just saying email me for everything, but if you email me, I can get you the information.
Okay.
Michelle, if you want to pop your email address in the chat.
Oh yeah,
on that slide. I don't know. I didn't write it down or anything.
Sorry about that.
I just know some possible people who might be interested.
Oh, great. That's awesome.
Are you guys on TikTok?
We are. That is not me. That is our managing editor, Danielle, is the primary TikTok person. I'm horrified by being on screen. She does a great job, though. She's very fun.
What kind of content does she post?
The last one that I was with her for, we went to the local indie bookstore and looked for books that we'd reviewed, and she just did a fun little, hey, look at it's out in the world. I don't understand TikTok, so I can only speak to that one. But I know she's doing stuff every day.
So Danielle said, is there anything different that you would recommend for pitching nonfiction books instead of fiction? good question.
Yeah, the author bio is going to be super important there. Whatever expertise you can highlight, previous publications, endorsements from other experts in the field, everything like that. Make sure that people know that you are the one who should be speaking to the subject, because like, I'm not an expert in science. I need to know that if I'm going to select a science book, even for a popular science audience, I need to know that this is someone who's speaking to their subject knowledgeably. I can do that for subjects that I have degrees in, can't do it for science. So give us that information up front.
What would you say is the percentage of fiction to nonfiction that you receive?
That we receive more fiction. We try to go as close to half as we can in the issue itself. Again, just to cover as much ground as possible, but we do see a lot more fiction.
So can I just ask a follow-up question to that specialization nonfiction books? So is that something you would put in the tip sheet then?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. We'll look at the author bio on the book too, if it's on the book, but tip sheet is a great place for it.
Okay. And in terms of other pieces of the tip sheet, important is it to have that little box that talks about, you know, the marketing campaign, you know, and author tours, that kind of thing?
Oh, I don't ever consider that.
Good.
The editorial side, honestly, we try to keep as far away from the marketing side as possible. I don't want to know where people are spending their money. I just want to know that it's a book that we can recommend to our audience.
Okay.
Any other questions from anyone? Kelly says lots to think about. That is true for sure. I know a lot of people struggle with the I'm even surprised to hear you say 4.5 months, because I feel like we try to aim for like 6 months, because it just seems like yeah.
I don't want to terrify people. I've been to a lot of conferences where people are very close to publication and I just can't do anything. So 4 to 5 months is safe-ish. 6 months is amazing. And we would love to see that. I do have books on my desk that are March already. I'm not going to be doing selections for those for a while though. So 4.5 months is safe for the window in which we're actually going to be looking at those books.
Here's something I've wondered for a long time. So let's say I'm submitting a book to you and you accept ARCs, right? It doesn't have to, it's not a finished copy, obviously. No. Like when the reviewer is reading it, I mean, in that phase, if this is like 6 months before the book is coming out or 4.5, on my end, for sure, I'm still correcting typos or reading it again or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about like, how does it feel for you as a reviewer if you encounter typos or errors, or is there a point where you're like, okay, no more with this one?
Our reviewers and I understand that there are going to be things that aren't perfect in the book. Almost every ARC says in the opening, hey, we're still going through the copy editing phase. You have to be forgiving. The reviewers know not to be too exacting on those points when they're getting to their actual critiques. We're critiquing what the book will be. We know that there's going to be a misplaced comma or two. That's not a big deal. They know to forgive that for a magazine title. Clarion titles are usually finished. We're usually seeing those after the fact. So they're a little less forgiving at that point because the book's already published. So I should just say that. But for an ARC, they know.
Liz says, for nonfiction, will you review a partial manuscript?
We can't really. The story has to be as complete as it can. It has to be as close to the finished product as possible. So we have seen that, like on the Clarion side, when people want to do that instead of hiring maybe a content editor. I would recommend getting it in as close to finished form as possible instead of sending a partial. We want an idea of how it ends too. Nonfiction or fiction.
I am actually not, and I may be the only person on this call. I'm not familiar with Clarion, as I know a lot about Forward Review, but I don't know much about Clarion. Can you just talk for a minute about what you're looking for with that magazine or that service?
So it's just a subset of Forward. The Forward magazines are the ones that appear in the magazine. Clarion reviews are fee for, so they're subject to the 1 to 5 star rating system. But on the website, they're all under reviews.
Got it.
Yeah, they're longer. The star rating is a difference.
Got it. Thank you.
No, no problem.
Do you archive all the reviews on your website indefinitely?
Yeah, I think it's built that way. I was searching earlier today for one of our reviewers for low star reviews because they were just curious, and they were going back all the way to 2009, which is I think when the website started after the magazine was founded. So early reviews aren't on there, but since the website started, all the reviews are on there.
That's great.
Yeah.
Danielle likes your advice on the tip sheet, and she says, do you prefer that the email with the tip sheet attached include that information as well, or should it be kept shorter? I don't know if I understand.
I honestly don't think it's a problem to put points twice. You can attach it as a PDF and also include it in your cover letter. Having information that we need available in a way that we can find twice isn't a bad thing.
Does anybody have any other questions? Any final thoughts for us, Michelle, or anything else you would like to share?
No, thank you very much for having us.
Well, Michelle, I don't know if you can speak to this at all, but our members might be interested to know. So Forward also offers like email marketing opportunities. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about that?
I can a little. I will say that we do try to keep sales and and editorial apart as much as we can, but I know a little bit of it partially because Matt, our executive editor, does a lot of the reading and interviewing for that. So I know that he does a marketed interviews where he reads the books and then he asks a series of questions, and those go out as marketing emails. The ads I'm not as familiar with. I honestly try not to look because I don't want to know who's spending money. It should never influence our decisions. So the interviews are great. They're fun to read. That's
really great that you guys keep that stuff so separate. Like I like that integrity on your part. We have booked interviews with Matt before, and just I can talk a little bit about our experience. I think we did it twice, and he generally sends the questions ahead of time, and you have plenty of time to answer, and then he whips it into shape, and it turns into this really nice email feature with pictures and stuff. So I think it's cool how you guys have, you have like your core service, but you've also really thought about like how to cater to the independent publishing community.
Thanks. Yeah, and I do know that the art on those, that our art director, she's fabulous. She spends a lot of time trying to make things look beautiful, and I think does a pretty good job.
All right. Well, I won't keep Michelle any longer if there are no other questions, but we can keep the room open if anybody wants to react or chat a little bit following the presentation. Any last questions for Michelle? Looks like we're getting a lot of good feedback in the chat.
Thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to do this.
Thank you for
a
coming.
lot of people are
joining
thinking
us.
very deeply.
Yeah.
All right. Good night, y'all.
Thank you, Michelle.
Michelle.
Thank you. We enjoyed you.
Thank you.